Walter, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
Yes, sir. So I
Great to
want to
be
be,
here.
yeah, it's great to be here too. So I want to begin with 5 years ago, this pandemic. There were so many things that changed. How did you get through the pandemic of 2020 and how has it radiated into your world in 2025?
Well, in 2020, I was creating content for piano learners. I had a YouTube channel and I used all that year to create asynchronous content, YouTube videos, online courses. And to me, that what made the biggest difference that year was the realization that there are new ways and there are new formats that I can use to support learners and to empower people to learn. And that's something I've been doing since then.
So talk to me a little bit about what you do on a daily basis with coaching and with writing and everything that's going on. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-old students. It's career day, and one of the kids is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How would you craft your answer?
Well, I'm a life and language coach, and what I do is I help people create their future across multiple languages and cultures. I work in 5 languages, and part of what I've done in the past include also writing content for Spanish learners. I'm the author of a series of 26 graded novels. So I am an author and I'm a coach and I like to say that I empower learners. I offer them tools and strategies and empower them to realize their potential.
So, what did you want to be when you were 12 years old? What was your dream job?
Um, that's a great question. And I wanted to be when I was a kid, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon.
Okay.
And you know that I was faced with this question a couple of years ago, and I remember I was doing a language coaching training. It was called Neuro Language Coaching, and it was about combining professional coaching practices with neuroscience research applied to learning and language teaching methods. And I thought, well, this is not very far from what I wanted to do as a kid.
Yeah.
And maybe it was about healing the brain when I was thinking in terms of neurosurgeon. And then when I thought in terms of neuro language coach, I'm still working with the mind in a different form. And so it's nice to see that I create a new way or a new meaning for that after all those years.
Yeah, for sure. So, take me back to where you were born and raised, and what were the foundational elements of wanting you to get into medicine and eventually coaching and writing and being multilingual? How did all of this happen?
I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I was raised in Argentina. I spent most of my life in Argentina. And in my family, there was a big interest, or there was a space, safe space to learn and to explore a wide variety of things, including science and the arts. And I remember when I was a kid, that was before I was even 10. I think that my mother would ask us to write stories, or we were encouraged to write stories, and we would get paid and for those short stories. And 20 years later, that's how I had an experience. That's I started writing my own stories and I started selling them on Amazon. And I already had some experiences, and there was a connection, something that I had been doing for even as a kid. So there was something around, and as I was growing, like there was a safe space to learn and to try new things, and even to normalize the fact that I could be even making money of this. So this could be a potential source of income. And 20 years later, I was making passive income on that, on my books, my stories that were graded stories for Spanish learners.
So, what was your favorite book growing up? What did you love to read?
I really loved Spanish literature. So, and then my favorite author was Cortázar, Julio Cortázar.
Okay.
And one of my favorites was Rayuela. It's called Hopscotch in English. And It's interesting. And this is the first time that I think about that that story, that novel takes place in half of it is in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and the other half is Paris, in
Yeah.
Paris in France. And so it's like it starts in France and then it goes to Argentina. And now that I live my life in multiple languages, so in as a life and language coach, I work in 5 different languages. I work in English, Spanish, German, Italian, Portuguese. Maybe this idea of like the possibility of living your life in more than one language, maybe that started with that book or being exposed to that type of literature and authors who were also using or living their lives in more than one language. So I thought, okay, maybe this is something I can do in the future.
So what made you learn multiple languages? What was the fascination?
Um, it started, my second language was English. And to me, that was the possibility of navigating um, the web or using internet as I was growing. I'm 38, so that was like 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago when I started diving into English. And to me, it meant learning opportunities to learn things that maybe were not available in Spanish, my first language. So that was the first the motivation that something that was very important to me was with English was that. And then in my 20s, my third language was German, and I was motivated to learn that language because I was studying piano and I wanted to continue my studies in Germany or Austria. Then I changed my mind, but I kept learning the language because I felt that connection with the classical music and with the German composers or Austrian composers. And with each one of the languages, I had a different motivation, and there were specific reasons. And I can tell you what brought me to learn each one of them.
So I'm curious of all of the languages, what's the hardest and what's the easiest?
The hardest is the language that I'm learning right now, that is Thai.
Okay.
And I'm not counting it among my languages because I'm just getting started,
Yeah.
or I'm working on it, and I have a good comprehension, listening comprehension, fairly good listening comprehension, and I'm still not fully able to speak.
Yeah.
So I'm working on it, and it's a distant language for
Yeah.
me. I was born in Argentina, Buenos Aires. So when we are talking about difficulty, usually I like to put it in terms of distance, and oftentimes there's a correlation between like the physical distance between countries and the difficulty of the language that we are learning. And I think that that's the case in my experience. So the most challenging so far has been Thai and is the most distant to Argentina.
Yeah.
And the easiest has been Portuguese,
Okay.
Brazilian Portuguese, and is the closest to Argentina.
Yeah.
So
S-
that has been my experience.
does it get easier though learning a new language because you know multiple languages?
Yeah, and there are two ways, and it can get easier. So the first one is that when you're approaching maybe a language in the same family of languages, like the same origin, like when you say Romance languages, if you start branching out and you say, like, okay, I'm gonna learn all the Romance languages. I don't speak French, for example, and I know that French would be relatively easy in terms of compared to other languages. Let's say if I want to learn Finnish or French, French would be much easier because I I'm already my first language is Spanish. It's the same language family, Romance languages, and I already also I learned Italian and Portuguese, and so it feels more familiar. Um, but there's another thing, and the second thing is that regardless of the family of the language or how close or how distant it is, you start learning, the more languages you learn, you start learning about how you like to learn
Yeah.
and what works best for you. And you have more information about what works and what doesn't. And there's also something in terms of confidence. It's like when you do that, and I think that the tipping point maybe is like with third language, and it's like it unlocks unlimited languages or potentially. Because when you say, okay, I learned a second language and I can speak second language, when you can say that of a third language, in my experience, it's like that means that you could learn four or five or six. Of course, there are limitations of time and even curiosity or interest because it's not that I want to learn all the languages in the world. And I know people who went on to learn 10 or 20 languages. My curiosity is more limited in that regard because it's a significant time investment.
Yeah. Yeah. So who's been an inspiration? Who's been kind of a hero for you to become who you are?
Um, there were many. I had inspirations. You mean in the field of language learning or in general?
Probably overall. Yeah.
So one of my inspirations when as I was getting and creating my book series and I was developing my online business was a guy named Steve Pavlina. He he had this blog on personal development and I used to read many of his articles. I even did a program with him in person. And he was all about personal development and like different life areas. He was an inspiration in my 20s. Um, then, when I got closer to spiritual development, I did a meditation retreat and silent retreat. And then the Buddha became an inspiration for me. And
Yeah.
the Buddhist teachers and the teachers that I follow now, they are my biggest inspirations. And in the name of and the field of language learning, there were a few people I really admire. People. There was a guy named Katsumoto. He had a blog called AJAT or All Japanese All the Time. And as I was learning German, he was a big inspiration because I really admired him. He was an American who was learning Japanese in the US, and he was able to learn Japanese to a very high degree without never traveling to Japan
Wow.
and using like very unconventional techniques and methods. And I really admire people who are able to maybe who learn a second language or a third language to a very high level. To me, that's something to be admired.
Yeah.
And that's very inspiring.
So what is the motivation for you every day to wake up to do the work that you do? You got to take care of your soul, but you have clients that you're changing their lives. What is that motivation for you?
Um, to me, is this feeling that I'm making progress at many levels at the same time. Like I'm on my spiritual path, and that I'm contributing to the well-being and the development and to the empowerment of other learners in so many different ways. And maybe is that this awareness that what I'm doing is moving me forward at different levels at the same time. Like I can make progress in my coaching business, and at the same time, I'm making progress in my spiritual path as a Buddhist,
Yeah.
getting closer to my goals, like at the same time. Keeping that in mind, keeping that present, like seeing that as opportunities when I'm working, I'm creating opportunities to make progress in my path and also help people to get better at different levels, not only with their worldly or external goals, but also at an internal level.
So of all of the clients that you've had, what's been one of the best letters or best responses you've gotten after you've coached them?
Um, One of my favorites is the work that I do these days is life and language coaching and it's very interconnected. So sometimes I'm working on life coaching in a foreign language, and sometimes I'm working just on language coaching, or maybe there's a coaching engagement that starts just as pure language coaching or even accent coaching. I offer accent coaching for people who are learning Rio Platense Spanish. So that's Argentinian Spanish or Uruguayan Spanish. They want to sound more native like. And one of the things that really lights me up is when I see there's people who come to me just for language coaching work. And then they say, oh, the work that we did is like, I've seen changes and transformation in other life areas. Like this wasn't just about uh, Spanish or the language that we were practicing, like this affected other life areas, and there were this so many unexpected changes and positive
Yeah.
changes and transformations that I had never expected.
So if you had a dream tonight, ran into the 18-year-old version of you, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've accumulated, what advice would you give your younger self?
Um, it would be start practicing getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Start putting that into practice, like leaning into discomfort more proactively and more consistently.
So, of everything that you've accomplished up to this point in your life, and more importantly, where you've evolved to, what are you the proudest of?
The proudest that I would say that is the how I design my life, my lifestyle to integrate my spiritual path and my passion for learning and skill building and languages and personal development. It would be how I managed to integrate all of that into one thing that makes sense.
So, let me ask you this. If I put you in front of a room of everybody that's been a client of yours throughout the years, and you could go to the front of that room and stand at a podium and tell them one fun story about you, a cool place you traveled to, an adventure that you went on, jumping out of an airplane, some kind of fun story, what would you tell that room of people?
I would tell them about the time when I I was visiting Germany for the first time in Berlin, and I went to dating event. It was like a speed dating event, and that was like maybe my third day in Germany, and there was a combination of German people, locals, and foreigners. And I will tell them how I dared to speak in German with all the people who knew German in Berlin at that time, in that setting, even though it would have been easier for me to use English. So how I lean into that discomfort of trying something new and being willing to get messy and being uncomfortable in that situation just for the sake of practice and becoming the person that I wanted to be.
So, Walter, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you, but you're in control. You run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, I see myself as a committed learner and consistent learner.
Yeah. So, if anyone wants to reach out, they want to hire you, they're interested, they want to learn more, where's the best place for them to go?
So I would invite people to go listen to my podcast. They can find it on poderaprender.com, poderaprender.com. And even though the name is in Spanish, I am putting out episodes in English and in Spanish. One other place could be my website, walterfreiberg.com, is like my first and surname. Or I'm also on LinkedIn or Instagram and other places.
Excellent. Walter, thank you so much. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck with everything. I'll put everything in the show notes. to redirect everybody to your podcast and your website. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for this wonderful questions. It was
Absolutely.
fascinating.
Looking to get new clients to your business through cold calling or email marketing? At Agency Y, they envision a world in which small and big companies have equal chances to win new customers in the market. Their purpose is to bring parity and reduce the gap between large and small firms with the help of their cold calling and cold email marketing services. Use the code Joe Dimino 10 at www.agencyyyy.org/coldcallingjoe.php or www.agencyyyy.org/emailmarketingjoe.php to get 10% off your first order. This is Joe Dimino of Neon Jazz and Famous Interviews, and I stand behind Agency Y to meet your business dreams.